The 4.1 Genshin trailer contains some incredibly cryptic voice lines and details, and in true Genshin lore fashion, it's left me with more questions than answers. Is Neuvillette the dragon? Is he not? What's Arlecchino planning? What's Wriothesley planning? Does Child even have a plan? In this video, we'll dissect the details hidden in the 4.1 trailer and discuss the current lore and relevant theories. I'm your leafy lore Minsleif, and I read the Genshin Impact lore so you don't have to. Please keep in mind this is a leak-free zone, so any and all information included in this video is either confirmed by Hoyoverse or speculative in nature. No leaks, only drip. 4.1's Archon Quest picks up right where 4.0 left off. After being declared guilty of the serial disappearances case by the Wriothesley, Child is being held in the Fortress of Meripide, an underwater prison in Fontaine. The Fortress of Meripide operates as an autonomous entity nominally not under the jurisdiction of Fontaine's legal system. After Wriothesley became administrator, he carried out a series of reforms that changed the way the prison works. Although it's a prison, according to Neuvillette, it's more of a gathering place for exiles, and some convicts do not even want to leave after they finish serving their sentences. While the prison is staffed by the guards, they do not last very long due to the numerous criminal gangs that reside there. Sigewinne, whom we've seen in the Overture teaser, works as the head nurse of the prison's infirmary. According to the 4.1 special program, Arlecchino arranges a meeting with Furina and Neuvillette to resolve this diplomatic incident of a Fatui harbinger being incarcerated. Apparently, the solutions that Arlecchino proposes will all be turned away, and it doesn't sound like she'll be taking this sitting down. Later on in the teaser, we hear Furina begging for her life.
Beggars believe just how carefree you have been. From the very beginning, you, the god Focalor, have failed to take action.
Who are you? What are you trying to do? Please, don't kill me! I'm begging you!
It's unclear who's threatening Furina, and it's unclear whether or not these two lines are even related to each other. I say this because Genshin likes to misdirect us in version trailers and splice lines together from different sections of the actual quest to keep us on our toes. Possible guesses for this voice could be Arlecchino, the previous Hydro Archon Egeria, or the voice of the Divine, as Minsleif does say that,
"But even she knows not to make an enemy of the Divine."
Neuvillette agrees to press false charges on Traveler and Paimon to give them an opportunity to infiltrate the fortress, talk to Wriothesley, and investigate Child's whereabouts. According to Linny, it sounds like the Fatui had already sent infiltrators inside the Fortress of Meripide, only for them to suddenly disappear. This might have something to do with the water from the Primordial Sea, a familiar substance from the 4.0 Archon Quest which has dissolved many people into water. We hear a voice say,
"Since they have no way to dispose of the leftover remains, they have ways to transform them into other forms and keep them in the fortress forever."
And this statement is actually all the more frightening since it follows right after Linny's accusations of Wriothesley kidnapping Lina and Furina. In the trailer, we have a brief shot of Wriothesley with what appears to be water from the Primordial Sea right behind him. Wriothesley is quite the interesting character, and so far the trailer paints him in a rather antagonistic light. The special program describes him as an ex-underground pugilist, meaning before his ascension as the Duke of the Fortress of Meripide, he could have been a champion duelist. Evil forces are at play in the dark recesses of the prison, and it's up to Traveler and Paimon to learn more about Wriothesley and his 4.1 story quest, Cerberus, Chapter 1, Act 1. Cerberus in Greek mythology being the Hound of Hades, the multi-headed dog that guards the gates of the underworld. A rather fitting constellation if I do say so myself. Now, Neuvillette's portion of the special program and trailer is incredibly interesting, and there's so many hidden details in this section, so let's break it down piece by piece. This scene in the trailer seems to be a flashback in Neuvillette's past since the cinematography is similar to the trials in the prior Archon quests. The Maréchaussée Phantom are a special detective force in Fontaine that reports directly to Neuvillette, and this force is mostly composed of Melusine. Not only does Neuvillette have a soft spot for the Melusine have powerful eyesight that allow them to find traces of criminals, making them perfect for their job but also an immediate target for criminals. Neuvillette's story quest Diluvius Chapter 1 Act 1 might have a focus on the Melusine story. There could have been an incident in the past in which Neuvillette and the Melusine faced discrimination upon having such authority in Fontaine, despite not being human. And it would certainly be concerning if the same were to happen again in the recent quests. Now there's something interesting with the name of Neuvillette's story quest. Diluvius is Latin for deluge or flood, and a potential flood seems to be part of the infamous Fontainian prophecy.
Until one day, the water levels in Fontaine will rise, and the sinful people will slowly be drowned. In the end, the people will all be dissolved into the waters, and only the Hydro Archon will remain, weeping on her throne. Only then will the sins of the people of Fontaine be washed away.
Fontaine has supposedly experienced floods in the past, as have other regions of Teyvat such as Ligue and Inazuma. One of the more well-documented floods happened to an ancient Fontainian civilization called Remuria, whose historical accounts you can find in the history of the decline and fall of Remuria. After the era of the Primordial One, the progenitor god of Teyvat, humanity began to covet things that belonged to Celestia. As punishment, their cities were destroyed by tsunamis and buried underwater after 100 days of rainfall. This will all relate to Neuvillette in a sec, so just bear with me. According to the broken goblet of the pristine sea, a god named Remus was given a goblet of primordial water, and with that, he established the nation of Remuria. The reign of Remus was considered the golden era of Fontaine, but he would later be driven to madness by a prophecy in which Remuria would be destroyed and its people would return to the primordial sea. Sound familiar? In a poor attempt to escape the prophecy, Remus would aim to eliminate all potential threats and those who refused to be under his rule. This included Lockfolks, Vishaps, and Barbarians. The Barbarians and Vishaps would eventually start a rebellion under the leadership of the dragon Skyla, a dragon king who ruled over the dragons born of the sea. Now, do you see how it's starting to relate to Neuvillette? The dragon king Skyla was sealed under a great tower of Remuria, but it was too late. Remus and Remuria were all swept up by an inexorable storm and sunk into the abyss. Years after the fall of Remuria, a Vishap who fought for Skyla made peace with an archer in the abyss, and the war between Vishaps and Remuria's survivors finally ended. In an official Genshin Impact Reddit post, Neuvillette's introduction includes the heading, "He who looks down on all that are haughty," a reference to the Bible verse Job 41:34, which speaks about the Leviathan, popularly depicted as a giant sea serpent or sea dragon. The name Skyla, the dragon king that was the catalyst for Remuria's destruction and fallen to the abyss, is the name of a sea monster in Greek mythology. In this myth, Poseidon's wife, Amphitrite, was jealous of the nymph Skyla and poisoned the pool in which she bathed. Glaucus, a sea god, fell in love with Skyla and asked the sorceress Circe for a love potion. But Circe, who was in love with Glaucus herself, gave him a drink that turned Skyla into a monster. A drink that turned Skyla into a monster? So Skyla equals sea monster, and Leviathan equals Neuvillette's introduction post equals sea monster. But that isn't to say that Neuvillette is Skyla, or even the Vishap that made peace with the survivors of Remuria. Remember, Teyvat was originally ruled by 7 dragon sovereigns, one for each of the current elements. We don't exactly know if Skyla was the original or reincarnation of the Hydro Dragon Sovereign, and we also don't know if Neuvillette himself is the new Hydro Dragon Sovereign, even though he's certainly having a tough time beating those allegations at the moment. Especially when Volume 2 of the book series that mentions Skyla can be found near Neuvillette's office in Palais Mermonia. There is a voice that speaks to Neuvillette in the 4.1 trailer.
You will see much in the human world, from the delightful to the depressing.
This voice sounds eerily similar to Furina. Here's a comparison of the English and Japanese voice audios.
And one day, when you have dwelt among humanity long enough, you will be placed to bring judgment over all as a spokesperson for Fontaine's past.
Raise your glasses in celebration! If you don't have one, then just raise your hand in lieu.
いつか君が多くの過去を受け入れたとき、この国の歴史を代表して、すべてを審判する資格を得る。しかし、神の中にも平凡な神と優秀な神がいるというのを忘れないでほしい。
Either Furina is speaking to Neuvillette or hear me out, but this is a wild theory, and I repeat, this is highly speculative, but this could be the voice of the Oratrice. I cover this theory a little more in depth in a previous upload, but basically the Oratrice could contain the consciousness of another god, Furina's twin perhaps. Fontaine could have had 3 Hydro Archons, Egeria, Furina, and the Oratrice, which explains the 3 thrones overlooking Coppelius and Coppelia and Irenaeus. The Oratrice could also be the voice you hear at the Fountain of Lucine.
So interminable. So lonely. Just how much longer?
Water has 3 states. The Hydro Hypostasis uses 3 Hydro Slimes to heal itself, 3 tears on the Oratrice, 3 fountain statues on the path to the Opera Epiclese, 3 thrones, and most importantly, 3 Moon Sisters. This is all just a theory, but what we do know is that this voice speaking to Neuvillette sounds like Furina, and that's all we really have so far. A new region we'll have to explore are the ruins of the old Fontaine Research Institute's central laboratory. Due to an explosion, there are now allo-gravity condensed water bodies suspended in the air. This explosion was probably due to a researcher named Edwin Eastinghouse. In his attempt to solve Fontaine's waterline crisis, he had been experimenting with archeum. Arc consists of two familiar opposing energies, pneuma and ousia, and when the two collide, an annihilation reaction is triggered. The ruins we see are probably a result of a large-scale annihilation reaction. 4.1 is shaping up to be such an interesting patch so far, especially with the release of two long-awaited characters. I'll be playing through the Archon Quests as soon as the patch drops on twitch.tv/Minsleif, so please feel free to stop by and say hi.
That's a nice hole.
Bruh.
If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. I'm your leafy lore Minsleif, and I read the Genshin Impact lore so that you don't have to.